Hi guys. So if you've been watching the news or just scrolling on social media, you would have seen that the CEO of Capitec Bank had something to say about the unemployment rate in the country. That based on the data that they have in terms of the transactions that are going in and out of people's bank accounts, that it would seem, according to his definition of unemployment, that our unemployment rate is actually only sitting at 10% because all of these people that are said to be unemployed are transacting. So there's money coming in and out of their accounts according to the data they've got at Capitec Bank. And it had me thinking, okay, first of all, people just making a plan just so they can survive, that does not equal, employment, right? And it doesn't mean that people are not looking for employment. Quality of life for all, regardless of skin color or background, is important, right? So we cannot accept the situation where people that are living in abject poverty, we say it's adequate just because there's money transacting, even $50 just coming in and out of their account on a monthly basis. It's almost as if telling a patient who is in pain and dying and saying to them, well, you're not really in pain and dying. We've just been defining pain and dying differently. So just sit there. If you sit there with it long enough, you'll get used to it and life will go on. I think there's something highly, very uncomfortable about it, right? And yeah, anybody has a right to opine. Business people will opine, especially business people in the private sector. They'll have opinions based on, where they're coming from, whether the lens, looking at things with the lens that they understand, even if that lens is coming from just pure privilege, right? But then Pakistan, who supported that statement, right, obviously just wanting to give themselves a tick to say, actually, in this current regime, which arguably is arguably the worst time we've ever had in this country after apartheid. One might even argue that the last time we've had such a dire situation in the country in terms of quality of life, in terms of just existing, right, and trying to make a living in the country. The last time things were this bad was during apartheid, right? That's the only period that we can compare it with. Like, yeah, I've never seen things this bad in this country. But anyway, so Park Stow coming out and supporting that statement was extremely disappointing, and it was extremely worrying because now it means this new regime is adopting the posture of saying it's fine if native South Africans are suffering. That's fine. That's where they belong. As long as there's some little money coming in and out of their hands or their bank accounts, that means they're fine. And that's terrifying. I mean, looking at the state of things at the current moment and to, adopt for Pakistan to adopt that posture, it's terrifying. It's telling you, where this country's going if things continue the way that they are. That's very, very scary. But anyway, that got me thinking about something else. So back in the 80s, we used to have a lot of business activity in the townships, right? Where native South Africans had all sorts of businesses, mainly like taverns and spa shops and the taxi business. And all of those businesses were by and large informal, right? And then you fast forward to 2025, where the digital economy is taking uh, foot. And I'm one of those people who's been a proponent of digitizing environments, even in the townships, so that we can play on the global stage, right? I've been a fan of that. And there was kind of like a quiet resistance to the idea uh, of introducing such ways of doing business in townships like e-commerce and all of that stuff. There's a quiet resistance. It's not defined, so you can't really say it's small business being resistant to this way of doing things, especially looking at a lot of the social media marketing that's going on for informal businesses, right? And you can't really say the consumer is the one that's pushing back, looking at like platforms like Shein and Demu and how they are doing well. But there is like a quiet resistance. And it got me thinking that maybe, just maybe, the reason a lot of those businesses in the townships that were run by native South Africans were successful is because they were informal. So you couldn't collect data on them. You couldn't collect data on preferences of people living in the townships in terms of what they prefer to drink, what they prefer to eat, based on data that is going through digital platforms, because those businesses were not operating on digital platforms. And it makes me think that perhaps why a lot of these the businesses that are run by foreign nationals in the township specifically are so successful is because they're highly informalized. A lot of the business activity does not happen digitally, right? There might be, allowing you to swipe your card and all of that stuff. But in terms of sourcing and supply and distribution, in terms of who's buying what, they don't ring your items, so nobody can tell who bought what. Like what are people buying on the weekend? What are people buying during the week? Which items are more preferred in terms of soap, in terms of tin stuff and all of that stuff. That data is not there. And that goes for hair salons as well. That goes for, goes for a lot of businesses that are currently run by foreign nationals in townships. And it got me thinking that maybe, just maybe, those businesses are successful because they are impenetrable, because there's no data. The best way to infiltrate somebody's business is to access the data that is going in and out of their business, because that will tell you what is happening around their business, and what makes their business successful, where they are vulnerable, and all of that stuff, right? So a lot of the businesses run by foreign nationals are highly informal in terms of how they are operating, and perhaps that's the reason why they are so successful. And one can argue the same thing about the taxi business, that by and large the taxi business is informal in terms of it's mainly a cash based business. So even if the taxi owners enter into credit agreements to buy the taxis, there's a certain amount of money that they have to pay every month for insurance and for servicing the loan on the taxi, and that's it. That doesn't tell you much. It just tells you that potentially the taxi owner was able to make enough money for that month to service that debt, but it doesn't tell you how much money they made. They could have serviced that debt any other way. They could be selling cigarettes. They could have gotten a loan from a cousin. So it doesn't necessarily tell you anything. And in terms of the amount of people that are boarding the taxis and how much they're paying and stuff, that is informal. That is cash business. So nobody can infiltrate it because nobody really knows what's going on. So it got me thinking that maybe I've been thinking about things the wrong way, trying to build e-commerce platforms in the townships where the flavor of the environment is that the environment is highly resistant to black business, any kind of black business. There's a comfort around black people just being cheap labor and consumers and nothing else, right? So maybe it's not such a good idea to be putting our data on digital platforms where it can be accessed, because it's the same argument about digital footprints, right? So what you're doing, what you're posting on your social media, what you're posting on Facebook and Instagram, on TikTok, that forms a digital footprint, and that could tell people about the places that you frequent, the kind of food that you like to eat, where you potentially live, the kind of car that you potentially drive. So there's a footprint as well for businesses, right? So yeah, it got me thinking that maybe that quiet resistance is the only thing that's left that could help facilitate an environment in which black business can thrive again in the environment that it mainly used to thrive in the past, which is the townships, right? Because there's over 100 billion of consumption happening in the townships, and right now that's going to the shopping malls, it's going to big business, and the small businesses that are benefiting are mainly businesses that are run by foreign nationals. So now where does it leave native South Africans? So maybe we can learn a thing or two. I don't want to enter into the conversation about foreign nationals and what needs to happen there. It's not a conversation that I want to have. I think there are a lot of people that are having that conversation. The conversation that I want to have is, how do we facilitate an environment where we have an active, where black business is active in the environment, and they're also creating work, jobs, and reaping the benefits of running a business. And maybe we can learn a thing or two from foreign nationals, and maybe we can learn a thing or two from the past. That maybe until things are such that the environment is fertile for everyone, regardless of skin color or background, to operate a business and have a fair shot of being successful, maybe the informal manner of doing things is the only, I don't know, secret weapon that black business has at a chance of success. I don't know. I'm just opining. I'm just thinking. I'm just hypothesizing. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you guys think.